What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, you possess the most powerful wealth creation tool ever discovered? It's not your education. It's not your connections. It's not even your skills or talents. It's something far more fundamental. Something you're using every second of every day, often without realizing its extraordinary power. After studying 500 of the world's most successful people for over 20 years, Napoleon Hill made a revolutionary discovery. There exists a mental law of success so powerful that it can transform an ordinary person into a wealth magnet, practically overnight. This isn't positive thinking or wishful visualization. This is a precise mental technology that the ultra-successful have been using for centuries, a system so effective that those who master it seem to bend reality itself to manifest their desires. The shocking truth is that wealth begins in the mind before it appears in your bank account. The most successful people throughout history, from Andrew Carnegie to Thomas Edison to Henry Ford, all applied this exact same mental principle before they achieved their extraordinary fortunes. And today, for the first time, I'm going to reveal precisely how this mental law works and how you can immediately apply it in your own life to attract the prosperity you deserve. Before I share the precise mental mechanism that Napoleon Hill discovered, the same mechanism that has created more millionaires than perhaps any other teaching in history, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell. Every week on this channel, I break down these transformative success principles into practical strategies you can implement immediately. This isn't theoretical knowledge. These are the exact mental technologies used by the world's highest achievers to manifest extraordinary success. If you're someone who's ready to escape the limitations of conventional thinking and access the hidden mental laws that govern prosperity, you won't want to miss a single video in this series. Also, if you're truly committed to mastering your mental power for wealth creation, type "Think Rich" in the comments below. This simple act of declaration will begin aligning your mind with the principles we're discussing today. Now let's dive deep into the revolutionary mental law that Napoleon Hill called the starting point of all achievement, a law so fundamental to success that ignoring it virtually guarantees a lifetime of financial struggle. When steel magnate Andrew Carnegie commissioned Napoleon Hill to study the world's most successful people in 1908, he gave Hill an extraordinary opportunity, unprecedented access to the greatest achievers of that era. For the next 20 years, Hill interviewed and analyzed over 500 of the wealthiest and most accomplished individuals, from industrialists like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford to political leaders like Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. What began as a research assignment evolved into Hill's lifelong mission to discover and codify the universal laws of success that anyone could apply, regardless of their background, education, or circumstances. The result was his landmark work, Think and Grow Rich, a book that has sold over 100 million copies worldwide and continues to influence success literature to this day. But what's often overlooked is that Hill's most revolutionary discovery wasn't about action strategies or business tactics. It was about the fundamental mental mechanism that precedes all achievement, what he called the master key to riches. This mental law was so consistent across all the successful people he studied that Hill concluded it wasn't just a helpful technique, but an absolute requirement for extraordinary achievement. The mental law Hill discovered was both simple and profound. Your dominant thoughts determine your dominant results. As he expressed it, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. This wasn't a motivational slogan, but a description of how reality operates. The most successful people had all developed the ability to maintain absolute mental clarity about what they wanted and unshakable belief in their ability to achieve it. This mental state wasn't occasional or sporadic. It was their default way of thinking. They controlled their thoughts rather than being controlled by them. This disciplined mental focus created a magnetic force that began attracting the people, opportunities, resources, and circumstances needed to transform their internal vision into external reality. Hill documented this pattern repeatedly in case after case. What appeared to outside observers as good luck or fortunate timing was actually the predictable result of this mental law in operation. When you think with sufficient clarity and conviction, you literally begin rearranging the universe to match your thoughts. What makes this mental law so powerful is that it operates regardless of your starting point or external circumstances. Hill interviewed people who began in poverty, with minimal education and no advantageous connections, yet achieved extraordinary success by applying this principle. He concluded that while external factors might influence the speed of achievement, they couldn't prevent it when this mental law was properly applied. Consider the story of Henry Ford, who had minimal formal education and began his career as an ordinary mechanic. What distinguished Ford wasn't superior knowledge or resources, but his absolute mental conviction that he could create an affordable automobile for the average American. He maintained this vision with such clarity and persistence that he eventually attracted the people and resources needed to revolutionize transportation and build one of the largest fortunes of his era. This pattern repeated across hundreds of cases Hill studied. The external circumstances varied dramatically, but the mental process remained constant. Clarity of thought combined with unshakable belief, maintained with disciplined persistence. But Hill's research revealed something even more fascinating about this mental law. It wasn't just the conscious thoughts that mattered, but the deeper beliefs embedded in the subconscious mind. He found that the most successful people had developed specific techniques to impress their goals and visions upon their subconscious mind. They understood that the subconscious operates like fertile soil. It doesn't judge what seeds are planted, but simply grows whatever is consistently planted within it. This explained why two people could consciously desire the same outcome but achieve dramatically different results. One person's conscious desires were aligned with their subconscious beliefs, creating a unified force for achievement. The other person's conscious desires conflicted with their subconscious programming, creating internal resistance that sabotaged their efforts. The most successful people had mastered the art of reprogramming their subconscious mind to support their conscious goals. They didn't just think about what they wanted occasionally or casually. They systematically impressed their vision upon their subconscious through specific daily practices. This brings us to the most practical aspect of Hill's discovery: the specific mental techniques used by the ultra-successful to align their conscious and subconscious minds. The first and most fundamental technique was what Hill called definiteness of purpose, the crystal-clear articulation of exactly what you want to achieve. This wasn't vague wishing or general hoping, but precise specification. The most successful people could describe their primary goal with such clarity that it became a dominant focal point for their mental energy. They wrote down this definite chief aim and reviewed it daily, often multiple times per day. This wasn't mere repetition, but an emotional reinforcement. They didn't just read their goal, they felt it as already accomplished, experiencing the emotions of achievement in advance. This combination of clarity, repetition, and emotional intensity was the mechanism for transferring their goal from conscious intention to subconscious acceptance. Once accepted by the subconscious, their goal began operating as an automated navigation system, guiding their perceptions, decisions, and actions toward its achievement. Are you beginning to see the extraordinary power of this mental law? Because what I'm about to share next are the specific daily practices used by the most successful people to implement this principle. This isn't general advice or vague encouragement. These are the exact mental technologies that separate extraordinary achievers from everyone else. And here's what's most important to understand. These techniques work regardless of your current circumstances or past experiences. Whether you're starting from poverty or prosperity, whether you have advanced education or minimal schooling, whether you're young or old, these mental practices can transform your results when applied with consistency and precision. The power of these techniques isn't theoretical. It's been proven through countless success stories documented by Hill over decades of research. So if you're ready to implement these practices in your own life, pay close attention to what follows. These next insights could completely transform your relationship with money and success if you apply them with the same discipline demonstrated by the achievers Hill studied. The first daily practice Hill documented among the most successful people was what he called auto-suggestion, the deliberate programming of the subconscious mind through specific emotionally charged statements. Each morning and evening, when the subconscious is most receptive, they would review their written goals and mentally rehearse their achievement with vivid sensory detail. But this wasn't passive reading, it was active mental engagement. They would speak these statements aloud with conviction, feeling the emotions associated with already having achieved their desires. This practice leveraged the psychological principle that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between an actual experience and one that is vividly imagined with emotional intensity. By repeatedly experiencing the feeling of achievement through this mental rehearsal, they were essentially programming their subconscious to accept their goal as an already accomplished reality. This acceptance then began manifesting in their external circumstances through altered perceptions, decisions, and actions. They noticed opportunities they would have previously overlooked, made decisions they would have previously avoided, and took actions they would have previously feared, all because their subconscious was now aligned with their conscious intention. The second critical practice Hill identified was the disciplined control of attention, what modern psychology calls selective focus. The most successful people maintained rigorously guarded mental environments, refusing to dwell on thoughts of limitation, failure, or negativity. This wasn't denial or wishful thinking, but pragmatic mental management. They understood that mental energy, like physical energy, is finite. Every moment spent thinking about what you don't want is a moment not spent focusing on what you do want. They cultivated what Hill called a prosperity consciousness, the habitual expectation of positive outcomes rather than fearful anticipation of problems. When challenges or setbacks occurred, they would immediately redirect their mental focus to solutions rather than dwelling on the problem itself. This selective attention created a filtering mechanism that determined what information from their environment would enter their awareness. Since we receive millions of sensory inputs every minute, but can only consciously process a tiny fraction, this filtering mechanism fundamentally shapes our perception of reality. By controlling what they focused on, the most successful people were literally experiencing a different reality than those around them, one rich with opportunities and possibilities instead of limitations and obstacles. The third mental practice Hill documented was the strategic use of imagination, what he distinguished as creative imagination versus synthetic imagination. Synthetic imagination rearranges existing ideas and information, while creative imagination taps into what Hill called infinite intelligence, insights and inspirations that seem to come from beyond your existing knowledge. The most successful people had developed the ability to regularly access this creative imagination through specific mental states. They would often create periods of quiet solitude where they could pose specific questions to their subconscious and then remain receptive to the insights that emerged. Thomas Edison, for example, would sit in his favorite chair, holding steel, balls above metal plates. As he drifted towards sleep, the relaxed mental state just before unconsciousness would often produce breakthrough insights. When his hand relaxed, the dropping balls would wake him so he could capture these ideas. This practice of intentionally accessing creative imagination wasn't mystical or magical. It was a practical technique for accessing the subconscious mind's ability to process information in ways the conscious mind cannot, creating connections and solutions beyond logical reasoning. I want to ask you something important. Are you truly ready to apply these mental principles in your own life? Because understanding these concepts intellectually is one thing. Implementing them with disciplined consistency is quite another. The mental law of success that Napoleon Hill discovered isn't a theoretical concept, but a practical power that manifests through daily application. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who merely wish for them isn't knowledge but implementation. The principles I'm sharing with you today have created more millionaires and billionaires than perhaps any other teaching in history, but only for those who applied them with unwavering discipline. If you've stayed with me this far, you clearly recognize the value of what Hill discovered. The question now is whether you'll join the small percentage of people who move beyond intellectual understanding to disciplined application. This decision, alone, to act boldly on what you've learned, separates achievers from dreamers. Another powerful mental technique Hill identified was what he called the mastermind principle, the exponential power created when multiple minds unite with harmony toward a shared purpose. He found that the most successful people rarely achieved greatness in isolation. They created intentional relationships with others who complemented their abilities and shared their vision, forming what Hill termed a mastermind alliance. This wasn't networking in the casual modern sense, but the deliberate creation of a mental synergy that produced ideas, insights, and opportunities beyond what any individual mind could generate alone. Hill described this as creating a third mind, an invisible intelligence greater than the sum of the individual minds involved. This principle explains why innovation and achievement often cluster around specific groups, and why isolation typically limits success. The most effective mastermind relationships combined diverse perspectives and abilities, united by shared values and objectives. This mental synergy accelerated achievement by multiplying creative problem-solving capacity and creating mutual accountability for consistent action. The mastermind relationship also provided critical emotional support during inevitable periods of challenge or doubt. Hill also discovered a fascinating relationship between decisive action and mental clarity. While thought precedes achievement, he found that bold action actually strengthens and clarifies thought. The most successful people didn't wait for perfect clarity before taking action. They understood that action itself often produces the clarity they seek. This creates what modern psychology calls a success spiral. Initial action produces partial results and increased clarity, which enables more effective action, producing better results and even greater clarity. This explains why Hill emphasized not just thinking rich, but acting bold. The two elements form a reinforcing cycle that accelerates achievement. The most successful people maintained a bias toward action, making decisions quickly when they had sufficient information and changing course quickly when results indicated a better approach. They didn't allow the desire for perfect information to paralyze their progress. As Hill expressed it, do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you may have at your command, and better, tools will be found as you go along. This willingness to act boldly, even with incomplete information, distinguished high achievers from perpetual planners who remained stuck in endless preparation. Perhaps the most powerful mental technique Hill documented was what he called going the extra mile, the habit of doing more than what is required or expected. This principle operated on multiple levels. Practically, it distinguished their work from others, creating exceptional value that eventually commanded exceptional compensation. Psychologically, it developed the habit of excellence that became part of their identity, reinforcing their self-image as an exceptional performer. And metaphysically, it aligned them with what Hill described as the universal law of increasing returns, the principle that when you give more than expected, you eventually receive more than expected. This wasn't wishful thinking, but practical psychology. When you consistently deliver exceptional value, you create both external opportunities, as others notice and reward your performance, and internal capabilities, as you develop skills and qualities beyond the average. The most successful people applied this principle not just in their primary work, but in every area of life. They didn't compartmentalize excellence, but made it their standard operating procedure, regardless of the task at hand. This consistency developed what Hill called the success consciousness, an internal expectation of exceptional performance that became self-fulfilling. Another critical mental factor Hill identified was the management of adversity and temporary defeat. The most successful people had developed specific mental frameworks for handling setbacks that maintained their momentum, while others became discouraged and abandoned their goals. First, they distinguished between permanent failure and temporary defeat, classifying almost all setbacks as temporary learning opportunities rather than terminal events. Second, They practiced immediate mental pivoting from problem to solution, refusing to dwell on what went wrong and focusing instead on what to do next. Third, they extracted specific lessons from each setback, transforming obstacles into stepping stones by asking, "What can I learn from this that will help me move forward more effectively?" This mental resilience created an almost paradoxical relationship with adversity. They experienced the same external challenges as others, but derived entirely different outcomes because of how they mentally processed these experiences. As Hill expressed it, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. This wasn't positive thinking in the shallow sense, but a pragmatic mental discipline that extracted value from every experience, including painful ones. The most successful people Hill studied also practiced a powerful form of mental time travel, what modern psychology calls prospective retrospection, or the pre-mortem technique. While maintaining absolute faith in their ultimate success, they would mentally project into the future and look back at their current plans, asking, what could prevent this from succeeding? This wasn't negative thinking, but strategic mental preparation. By identifying potential obstacles in advance, they could develop contingency plans and preventive measures, turning potential failures into opportunities for preparation. This mental discipline created a powerful balance between optimistic expectation and practical readiness. They expected success while preparing for challenges, a combination that made actual success far more likely. This prospective thinking also created a mental flexibility that allowed them to adapt quickly when circumstances changed. Unlike those who became rigidly attached to their original plans, the most successful people remained committed to their goals while staying flexible about the specific methods for achieving them. This mental agility allowed them to navigate changing conditions without losing momentum toward their ultimate objectives. I know we've covered a lot of ground, and you might be wondering how to integrate all these mental principles into a practical, daily system. So let me share with you the exact morning routine that Napoleon Hill documented among the most successful people he studied. A routine you can begin implementing tomorrow morning to activate these mental laws in your own life. This isn't complicated or time-consuming, but it must be done with consistency and emotional engagement to be effective. First, in the quiet moments just after waking, review your written statement of your definite chief aim, the primary goal that commands your full commitment. Read this statement aloud with conviction, feeling the emotions of having already achieved this goal. Second, review your plan of action for the day, identifying the specific steps that will move you closer to your objective. Third, spend 5 or 10 minutes in what Hill called creative visualization, mentally rehearsing successful completion of your most important tasks for the day. And finally, express specific gratitude for the progress you've already made and the achievement you anticipate. This entire routine requires less than 15 minutes, but activates all the mental laws we've discussed: definite purpose, auto-suggestion, controlled attention, creative imagination, and prospective thinking. Now it's time for you to take action on what you've learned. If you're ready to implement these powerful mental principles in your own life, to think rich and act bold using the proven techniques Napoleon Hill discovered, then visit the link in the description below to download my free Think Rich Action Guide. This comprehensive resource provides a 30-day implementation system for developing these mental disciplines into automatic habits. You'll receive daily guided exercises for programming your subconscious mind, specific scripts for effective auto-suggestion, a structured system for defining your definite purpose, and practical worksheets for creating your mastermind alliance. This isn't general information. It's a specific action plan for implementing these principles with the consistency required for transformation. Remember, the mental law of success that Napoleon Hill discovered works with mathematical precision when applied correctly. The only question is whether you'll apply it with the same discipline as the extraordinary achievers he studied. The choice you make right now, to take bold action or remain a passive consumer of information, will shape every result you experience moving forward. Click the link below to begin your 30-day mental transformation and discover firsthand how thinking rich while acting bold can completely reshape your financial destiny.